Trump is not a fascist. It's actually inverted totalitarianism, which is much, much worse.
I'm a political scientist. I specialize in authoritarianism. I was tagged so many times in this video, and I've got some notes. I'm in the business of providing free academic resources, which means this may end up a more than 3-minute video, which means you may find yourself wanting to skip ahead. I know I would. I'm here for you. I've got a contents. So I'm going to start by explaining the difference between ideology and regime type. We have a bit of an apples and oranges problem here, because fascism and totalitarianism are concepts designed to measure two very different things. Then I start comparing fascist totalitarianism with capitalist totalitarianism before I start critiquing inverted totalitarianism, which is the concept that Aaron, the creator of Stitch, introduces. And if you're only interested in what I have to say to Aaron, you can skip ahead to this point. And if you're just looking for reading recommendations and references, you can skip to here. Fascism describes an ideology, whereas totalitarianism describes how power functions within a political system. Totalitarianism describes a regime type. Ideology is the reasoning behind that political system. Why does power function in this way? How does a regime justify this power arrangement? For example, in some cases, socialism as an ideology is used to justify authoritarianism, based on the ideological argument that no single person or group should hoard wealth and therefore power. In other cases, socialism justifies the creation of democratic institutions designed to guarantee access to political power. Democratic elections are just one example of this. Every political system is guided by a normally messy patchwork of sometimes conflicting ideologies. Totalitarianism is special because it is exclusively dictated by one all-encompassing, all-powerful ideology. And this is where it becomes all too easy to confuse totalitarianism as a regime type with fascism as an ideology, because, as I've discussed before, fascism almost always results in totalitarianism. And this is why I make a point of separating ideology and regime type, because we can and should identify political parties or wannabe dictators as fascist before they take political power, before they have the power to put that fascist ideology into action, before they are able to build this totalitarian system. That said, Aaron's video makes a really interesting point about how capitalism, as the dominant ideology justifying the existence and authoritarianism of the US regime, has potentially shifted in recent years. So let's compare them. Let's compare fascist totalitarianism with capitalist totalitarianism. Starting out strong, like Aaron, with definitions. There are 3 conditions which all need to be met in order for a regime to be classified as totalitarian. A single all-powerful ideology, total participation of the entire population, coerced or otherwise, and power needs to be held exclusively by one individual or one small group. Authoritarian regimes will often have 1 or 2 of these characteristics, but not all 3. For example, the Chinese regime has a single ideology, socialism with Chinese characteristics, and power is held exclusively by members of the Communist Party. It has been through periods of totalitarianism, like the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s-ish, where the Chinese regime did demand that all citizens actively, demonstrably participate in both ideological violence and state violence at the time. However, the current Chinese regime does not. In a totalitarian regime dictated by an ideology of fascism, there is no way not to participate in the racial ethno-nationalism of the regime. For example, in an apartheid state, every aspect of life is dictated by the racial ethnic categories determined by the regime. Any deviation from this racial hierarchy is punished violently. Mixed-race children born under apartheid, like Trevor Noah, were born a crime and were forcibly separated from their single-race mothers. In a totalitarian regime dictated by an ideology of capitalism, there is no way not to participate in the capitalist economy. Every aspect of life is dictated by participation in the capitalist economy, as directed by the capitalist in-group and their growth profit motive. Those unable to participate according to the economic demands dictated by the totalitarian state are punished violently. For example, those who lose their jobs also lose access to healthcare. The disabled and chronically ill are forced to either find some way to pay for their treatment, or they die. And this is not just some left-wing argument. According to The Lancet, 68,000 Americans die unnecessarily each year because the United States healthcare system is run according to an ideological profit motive rather than health. So is this the inverted totalitarianism that Aaron was speaking about in the original video? There is one really important feature that would disqualify inverted totalitarianism from totalitarianism, and that is that inverted totalitarianism wants citizens depoliticized. It does not want citizens to actively participate in politics. It does not demand that citizens actively and convincingly demonstrate that participation. Inverted totalitarianism is authoritarianism, not totalitarianism. The corporation-dominated US regime wants all citizens to participate. It wants them to follow trends, to buy stuff, to participate in consumerism, but it does not force them to. Homesteading is still a thing. Going off-grid is still a thing. Boycotting is still a thing. If you've made it this far into the video, you might be asking yourself whether we should just abandon the inverted totalitarianism concept altogether. Why keep using the term if the power relations it describes are covered by authoritarianism rather than totalitarianism? Because the concept of inverted totalitarianism made this entire video, this whole discussion, possible. This right here, this is the entire reason we create concepts in political science, to guide discussions like this. Authoritarianism is a concept. It was created to help us discuss regimes that don't quite fit the criteria for totalitarianism, but which cannot be considered democratic. Democracy is a huge concept. It covers pretty much everything we could possibly hope for from a political system. As a concept, it gives us direction. It frames discussions around what we expect of our political system, what we want going forward. We expect to have a say in how our country's regime is run. We expect politics to be transparent. We expect fairness and equality. Democracy as a concept gives us this language. It gives us this springboard from which to talk about these things that we expect, what we demand from our political systems. The concept of inverted totalitarianism or managed democracy, these were designed to trigger arguments. It was designed to make us question the status quo, to make us question whether or not companies should have this much power over politics and what this means for a regime's self-proclaimed democracy. So even as I sit here, as someone who researches authoritarianism for a living, and I say the US regime is not yet totalitarian, the concept of inverted totalitarianism has already helped me to frame this discussion and to interrogate aspects of US authoritarianism that we should absolutely question and criticize if we want to avoid the world's most powerful regime backsliding into all-out totalitarianism. And this is why my personal and therefore also professional response to Arian's video is just, yes, more of this, more conversations like this, more difficult and contested concepts and terms, more of your revolutionary book club. I'm here for it. I followed you. I encourage everyone who follows me to do the same.